if the person that I'm investing in doesn't ask for a reference for me, that's a really bad sign. There are a lot of assholes in our industry. I mean, for one of my companies, they just raised a Series A. Part of that A round was to take out an existing investor that was a huge negative force on the company, and a massive energy drain on the founder.
Right.
It was terrible. Man, it was such a negative. Founders out there, like, due diligence on your investors prior to taking money from them.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Demo Day, the podcast for entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, where we demystify the culture of joining one of the top accelerators, incubators, or VC funds from around the world. I'm your host, Sean Goldfaden from Coefficient Labs, and on today's episode, we interview Jeff Bocan from Okapi Ventures. Without further ado, let's get into Demo Day. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today on Demo Day.
Yeah, I'm psyched to be here, Sean. Thanks so much.
So, Jeff, one of my favorite things about our last conversation was listening to sort of your core key values of yourself, and the things that you mentioned that were so important to you is, number one, lead by example, and number two, have a positive attitude.
Yes.
And having known you now for a couple of years, you emanate that positive attitude. Jen came in the room and was like, God, Jeff's a really nice guy. And I just want to say it's really great to have you here. We appreciate you. And I'm excited for today's episode.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. And I love the positive attitude. It's a mantra of mine, even within my family.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. I have 4 kids, and my youngest, there was a stretch last summer, we ran out of things to do for the summer. With scheduled camps or whatever. So we had Camp Daddy one week.
Oh, that's cool. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, it was fun. Well, we did all kinds of things with my kid for the week, and where I took a lot of time off, and some of my older kids helped out. But we made camp T-shirts and positive attitude. We wrote that was the camp motto.
Camp positivity.
Yeah. So around the neck of the shirt, it said positive attitude, and then the back of the shirt said "Start with yes," which is another family motto. We lean forward, lean into things, start with yes.
Yeah, I love it. So let's peel the onion back a little, because I think that, sometimes people, especially myself included, the quote unquote positivity, the optimism, almost it's just who I am, who you are in that way. But, I'm sure you and I both have had moments of hardship. We've had moments where it's I don't want to fucking be positive, and I don't feel like everything's great. And you have tragedies the Palisades fires. You have all of these, roadblocks that hit you in the face. And so, keeping that as a steady beat of the drum is something that you have to work on. It's like a muscle that you're, growing. Why is it important just in life to have a yes first attitude, to have a positive first attitude? What can people that maybe that doesn't come as natural to them understand that maybe they don't see? I mean, not that I've got it all figured out, but I think that when you start with yes, you are open to all the possibilities, and at least have a very open mind about what can happen. So obviously in the venture capital space or in entrepreneurship, you're looking to create new opportunities. That's how big businesses are created, is when you are finding an opportunity that others haven't seen yet. So if you're kind of leaning back, arms crossed, you're kind of, I'm not so sure, you don't see the doors that are actually probably open that in front of you. So you need to start with that. It's kind of ironic in venture that, I start with yes, but I say no 99.99% of the time. Yeah. Which is a little frustrating to me, actually. But because I look at 1,000 deals a month and I'll do maybe one. So, but I always to start reading the pitch or to engage with a founder, you have to start leaning in, and you have to start with the belief, and then maybe from there you're knocking it down well, why doesn't this work? But you have to start with what are all the possibilities, what can really happen? And I think it's just critical for founders to always, when you have that positive view, that you can find windows and angles that others are maybe not seeing, and you can go for it. Now, you were talking about how it's a staple for you to teach this to your children, keep it within the family, let them know about it. A lot of people don't have those parents that are so confident in the opportunities of the world. In fact, so many are more you shouldn't do that, or you can't do that. Is that something that came from your parents, and is that natural to you that it's always been that way? Or is it something that over time you're this is how I want to do it, and I want to pass this down to my family?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if it was for my parents so much. Or they encouraged me to take risks and try things and try new things and gave me a lot of flexibility and rope. But I think for me, it was things have worked out quite well for me without. I followed kind of a weird path, all right, and it wasn't it wasn't all set up for me. You know, I kind of didn't go through things in a planned sequential way. I was kind of open to opportunities and things have worked out. I mean, I even got into venture capital kind of on accident. I wasn't trying to be a VC.
Yeah, you were trying to get a job at a startup in London, right?
Right. And then it turned into a venture capital job. So, but it's like things like that have worked out when you're open to opportunities and you know, being positive. And to be honest, people like interacting with other positive people. And you know, business, especially venture capital, but even just within business, it's people get to self-select who they want to work with, who they want to hire, and people want to be around other positive people. And I think it creates more opportunities for you when you are more positive.
Yeah.
And aside from seeing the opportunities, like people want to pull you in. They want that positive energy, and it's a plus. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not that like intentional about it, I guess, as much as, you know, I just try to be that way.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good segue, because I never really got to ask you this in our last conversation, but like, what's a normal week like? You know, what's a normal week like, both for Jeff individually and, you know, maybe for people that are like, what the hell do venture capitalists do every week? How would you describe a typical week as a VC and maybe even in your personal world?
Yeah. So largely it's broken into thirds.
Okay.
I spend about a third of my time working with our existing portfolio companies. So I'm on the board of a lot of different companies that we've invested in. And whether it's board meetings formally or just trying to help make a business introduction with a customer for one of our portfolio companies, for somebody helping interview a potential senior manager for one of the roles in one of our portfolio companies. Like I will do that sort of stuff every day, or interacting with fellow investors who are invested in the company. On my drive up here today, like that's a whole car ride, was talking to fellow investors in one of our portfolios.
You're welcome. I knew you needed to catch up with everyone.
Make the time. So a third is on portfolio. A third is looking at new deals. Okay. And maybe a little bit more than that, actually, but at least a third, where I'm looking at new opportunities, whether it's getting formally pitched by founders, just reading through decks that I'm getting access to. And then the other third is a combo of generating deal flow. So meeting with people like you or fellow VCs or other entrepreneurs who maybe they don't have an active opportunity, but I'm just spending time with them because I think, all right, hey, here's somebody who's really connected. Someday they might introduce something great to me.
Yeah.
So there's generating deal flow in that last third. And, you know, it's like attending parties and events or whatever it may be that, you know, in the entrepreneurial community, or just texting with people. Hey, you know, what have you looked at recently? That's exciting. What should I be investing in? And then spending time with some of that networking is actually with investors too. So investors for myself. So like our money doesn't, like I don't have a money tree in my backyard. I wish I did. But like I need to raise money too. It's generally more episodic, where we raise every 3 to 4 years. But in those fundraising years, I'm spending a lot of time meeting with investors, trying to get them to invest into our new funds.
What's one thing you've learned over the years about maintaining those sorts of relationships? Later in the podcast, I want to ask a little bit more about what you look for in LPs, right? Not just in startups, but in those sorts of relationships. But you know, when it comes to maintaining those sorts of relationships, what's been something you've learned over the years that's helped you down the road? You know, maybe early in your career it wasn't so clear, but now that you've been in it, what's a learning you've taken away in just the concept of maintaining relationships?
Yeah, that frequency really matters. So, you know, you can have a great relationship with somebody, and then if you don't talk to them for 3 years, then you ping them out of the blue again. Like, yes, you can often pick up where you left off, but I think it's better to have like lots of little touches along the way. So that's another thing I try to be somewhat more deliberate about when we get some really great portfolio news, for example. Like I will forward it with a personal note to all of my investors saying, hey, this had happened. And then it gives a chance to dialogue about something else. And if I do that at least twice a year, of course we do a newsletter, but that goes out to everybody and it's not personalized. But if I have a chance to have a personal touch point, or maybe it's just a text message And it can even be about like, oh, I know this person is a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Like, I'm going to text them congrats on the Super Bowl win or whatever it is. But those little touch points really matter. And I think that's probably the most important thing that I found.
Now,
Quantity over quality sometimes.
Some people listening may be like, well, yeah, Jeff, obviously you should keep in touch and you should be frequent, but how do you do it? Sometimes I forget, or sometimes like it's just not top of mind. They may be wondering like, what's your methodology? Like, is it come very natural and you're just like, oh, I should hit this person up? Or do you have to schedule time for yourself or kind of remind yourself to sit down? What would your actual methodology be when it comes to those quick little pings or those frequency touch points?
I mean, to be honest, I probably should schedule it more and be more deliberate about it.
It's more authentic, just like you it's almost like a feeling of, oh, I should hit this person up or talk to them.
Or if I'm in their city or if I'm traveling around or something happens, like I try to be open to reminding people like, hey, I'm in town. I mean, last night, like I was up in the Calabasas area, which I'm not up there too often.
Yeah.
And I pinged a guy who, is a longtime friend who I've done stuff with over time. And I was like, oh yeah, I should ping this person. So sometimes when I'm in town, it's a little bit more serendipitous, but which isn't a great strategy.
No, totally.
I try to
real,
always be open to that. But for me, like the formal way of doing it is just when people love getting good news, and especially people that have backed you, like our investors, like they're not only backing me, but they like to hear about the portfolio companies, and it's a long game. Like they can put in capital with us, and they often don't see it for, like, if they put in $1 million with us, they may not get that money, like get the beginnings of returning that capital for 5, 6, 7 years.
Wow.
And then by the time they fully are out of the fund, it could be 10 to 12 years. So it's a long game. So you need to kind of keep people warm and reminded of why they made the investment and how things are going.
Giving good news is always the most fun, but sometimes we have to give bad news. And so from the perspective of both founders listening to this that are, maybe the quarter's been rough. Maybe they had to let someone go or they left and got recruited out. But what's the right way, or what's a spectrum of right that you want to see from founders when bad news needs to be delivered? In your opinion, is there a difference between the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it?
Well, the wrong way to do it is wait and delay bad news. I mean, honestly, I'd mentioned that car ride up. That car ride was because the founder had not updated people in 5 months, and there wasn't great news along the way. And people suspect that because people fill the void of
if I'm not hearing good news,
I'm assuming the worst. And then things start to spiral out of control. They get a lack of confidence in the management team, which that kind of compounds itself down the line. And it's gonna be harder for this founder should he need to go back and raise more money. The existing investors aren't going to be dying to give it to him because now, like, they have the seeds of doubt, like, sowed at this point. Like, I'm not so sure about this guy. And then when I've reached out to him to see how things are going, he's kind of not really getting back to me or getting back with nothing much. So I'm assuming the worst. So I think it's best to pull bad news forward early and not necessarily to spin it as like, oh, this is bad, but everything's going to be great. I think deliver the bad news and then say what you're doing about it. And even if you don't know what you're going to do about it is going to be right, at least lay out a plan. But I think letting people know early and then laying out the game plan for how you're going to address it, and then say, I'm going to check back in with you a couple, 2-3 months later and let you know how we've been doing and if we're on track to getting things back where we need to be. But I think that laying it out there early with a clear plan is key.
Laying out early, have a clear plan, check in frequently with post communication, like those 3-thing combo. When you've got some bad news,
and then asking for help. Honestly, I think that's a big part of it too. It's like, hey, I've run into this problem. Like we're struggling here. This is my plan. Give me some feedback if you think that's right, or if you think you can help me execute this plan. Let me know.
Wow, that's a great extra piece of advice, because then if you're giving the bad news early enough, then you're able to almost like empower people to help you early in that journey to right the ship. But if you deliver it at the very end, it's like, dude, why didn't you come and talk to me a couple months ago?
We can't do anything about it. Yeah, because I mean, look, the startup process is a collaborative process. I mean, from the beginning, yes, you are receiving money from investors, but like they are standing beside you. It may be with their checkbook, but a lot of people are willing to help beyond that as well. So they are backing those teams more than just with the money. And it's even an emotional investment too. Like they're in there with you. So they want to be able to help. So sharing in the pain and, helping people get through it if they can.
What market trends are you excited about right now, if any at all? And I'm also curious, like with a preliminary follow-up question, which is like, is it tough for you to allow yourself to get excited about industries outside of your wheelhouse? It's sort of like if like you love startups and investing, but it's your job day to day. What are you excited about these days? And does it fit within, what you're currently doing, or has that been an obstacle over time?
Yeah. I've been super excited about what's happening with AI, of course. A lot of people are going to talk about AI, but what I like most about AI as a seed investor is that we don't have to put a huge amount of money into companies to see if we can get some real traction early. So the AI tools are just making startups more efficient. So I think that ultimately is going to allow us to have more shots on goal at successes. And so sometimes we will write 1 or 2 checks into a company. We may not even really feel like we've figured out if they've gotten there yet. And the companies have had to consume a fair amount of capital to get to that point. I think we're pulling forward, is their product market fit sooner with the AI tools, because you're not having to invest so much capital and time to get to that point. So I'm really excited about that. So we can test a lot of new verticals and it's quicker to launch products to market. So the pace is what I'm excited about, and just seeing a lot of opportunities, especially in areas where there are large data sets that have been difficult to work with in the past. And it's creating new opportunities there in all types of verticals. So, I'm not like, I'm not excited just about cybersecurity or just about fintech or whatever it may be. But
right.
I think there are lots of verticals that haven't been disrupted yet that people can really go after now with not a lot of capital.
And now and if you have a structure in your head or a framework, but with how quickly things are moving, how do you evaluate potential opportunity when like everyone's, it's this and AI and it's this and AI and it's this and AI, and like everyone's coming at you with that kind of, this is my carrot and this, it's like, this is I've got these 2 things, but there's so much more now coming in. There's more noise. There's more people.
Ton more noise.
Right. And how do you evaluate and kind of differentiate between, especially at the seed stage when it's early, like you don't have that much data yet.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I see a lot. I'm seeing more opportunities, but I'm seeing more of the same things. So then ultimately it's like you either are thinking, gosh, am I picking the right horse here? There's so many opportunities all going after the same. I believe in the problem area. I'm hoping I'm picking the right team. You don't love being in that situation because who knows if you're picking the right team, which is hard. So what we really look for, or what I really look for in particular, is this kind of earned insight that a founder will have. So the technology is great, but it's kind of a commodity and everybody's got it. So what really differentiates the market opportunity for me, or the business opportunity, is the founder or the founding team. Do they have the earned insight in that? There's typically a vertical market they're going after, whether it's in the payment space or in the insurance industry or whatever, but have they worked in that industry or worked adjacent to that industry where they understand the customer pain point exceptionally well? They understand the tech ecosystem that their technology is going to integrate within or replace. Do they understand the workflows of those users extremely well to understand what to build and then how they're going to have a product that will delight those customers? And then do they understand the buying, like the selling process, or the consumer buying process, or the way to sell that product to the customers? A great product's awesome, but by itself, it's not all that useful if it can't be actually sold and delivered and maintained with a customer. So understanding, if you don't understand the industry and the vertical very well, you are probably going to fail on the go-to-market side and the product support side, even if you have an amazing product. And then also with that earned insight typically comes relationships, which are just so key. I mean, AI by itself, great, but like no one wants to interact with an AI by itself. Like people like doing business with other people and people that they like and people with positive attitudes. So do they have relationships where they have a running start where they can get into customers early, develop strategic partnerships early and channel partners for distribution and ultimately for hiring? It's like, is this a manager who can, or a founder who can recruit the relevant people who also have relevant domain experience, with the kind of credibility where someone's gonna be like, yeah, I'm gonna join that startup because this person knows exactly what they're doing. They know my space, they have the right product, and this is gonna be a huge company someday. So it's that, with that core of earned insight, like that can be the kind of center of gravity, I guess, to make all those other things happen and spin around for recruitment, customer acquisition, knowing what product to build, all those things. But that earned insight of the founder is key.
Last episode, we had TX Zoo over from Fika Ventures on the show, and he was telling us this really cool story about how I believe they brought in a firm, I'm pretty sure it was from outside, that analyzed all of their most successful investments to try to build some kind of signal. Like, what are the signals, right? And it's like, okay, is this a repeat founder? Has the founder had another exit in the past? Like all these different little indicators and keys. And they found that the only pattern that they could see amongst their top 1 percentile or their top startups was the speed at which founders responded to emails. And that the single most linear pattern was responsiveness. Yeah. And that on the flip side, their least successful were the ones that were least responsive or waited to send that email. And I found that fascinating.
That is.
I was wondering in your, in your worlds, well, you may not necessarily have a team that like analyzed it. When you kind of think about like your good investments versus your great ones, or the ones that you are so excited about, is there traits that you've seen, or are there patterns that you've seen that differentiate the good from the great? Not even the bad from the bad, but in that kind of head-to-head arena, what are the things that really like drive the greatest of your portfolio companies forward?
Yeah, for me, it was in my best deals, it's where the founder
responds to emails quickly.
I want to go back and look to that, actually. Now that you said that, it's like, and I'm going to start using that I'm going to thank you, TX, for that. For me, it's been there when you started to say responsiveness. I was going to say to customers and the market, but in particular, like really listening to customers and especially early on. So when founders, you have to have a lot of conviction into what you're doing. But if you have too much conviction, you might be missing the biggest opportunity when you just think you're right. And you don't want to listen to everybody because not everyone's opinion is equal. But for a number of my best investments, the kind of core business and the main business revenue driver it was a derivative of the original product or idea. It wasn't like the first thing. But then once they got into it, they realized like, oh, actually we need to move over into this slightly adjacent space, because the customer would say, hey, I love what you're doing, but if it could do this, like it would really be amazing. And then what they found is that like that doing this is the part that was common with a lot of other customers, and that was the real value driver going forward and a way to really differentiate. And so having that flexibility and adaptability early on, where it's like, it's this strong conviction lightly held, where it's like, all right, yes, I firmly believe this, but I got to hear from customers once I start engaging and really listen. And it's like, oh, maybe we should be doing this and move. It's not a complete pivot. It's more like a slight turn. But those are the ones that have worked out the best, where whether it's a business model tweak, maybe they lean into a feature that. So, one of my best investments was Duo Security, which pioneered two-factor authentication. Wow! They ended up getting bought by Cisco for $3 billion, and I was in there very lucky as writing the very first check. Wow! But like what they were doing originally and doing the two-factor authentication, they were able to pivot. They started more as it probably goes into too much detail to get into this whole thing, but it started more as like this enterprise approach, and then what they realized was that. For like enterprise cybersecurity almost. But what they realized was having more endpoint access and making it easy for companies to use and a much lighter product early on, where it's like, hey, we're just going to provide a tool that will let you get access to the accounts, allowed it to proliferate throughout the organization much more quickly, as opposed to enterprise saying like, oh, I don't want this big heavy system that I need like tops down, and it being kind of a bottoms up product, and it scaled really rapidly.
How do you balance, and this could be both from an investor perspective. So let's do it from the investor perspective. How do you balance your data driven analysis, sort of that like, show me the numbers, show like I'm an investor, so I need to understand the logic of the data, versus your intuition. Like I know it. I feel like this is where it's going. Has that ever been a challenge for you? Is that something that you think is a superpower of yours? Like what's the spread in that in that space of data versus intuition? Have you developed any sort of POV on that?
Yeah, unfortunately at the seed stage, we need to be a little bit more intuition focused, because there's not a lot of data. There's some data, but sometimes you can really be misled by that early data. You need, so for a startup to really get big, they need to have a repeatable and scalable sales model and a product that can be enjoyed by a lot of people, a lot of potential customers. You can have a product that's killing it for one really large customer, which is fantastic. Like I have a startup right now, which I've moved forward. I did the pre-seed. I'm just I led the seed round last week, and I'm still a little nervous about it, in that like they only have a handful of customers. They're crushing it with these customers who are big Fortune 100 customers, and they're largely in one vertical market. The company's called Credos AI. And they have some really large telecommunications customers, T-Mobile, Verizon, US Cellular, which is awesome. Huge customers. And their product is doing a great job for these customers. But, can they break out of that vertical? Can they repeat that product with other companies, other big companies who are solving a similar problem? It's mainly around collecting late payments from customers. In any given month, like 20% of Verizon's customers don't pay their bill, or at least are late. Which maybe is understandable. It's kind of the U.S. population.
Yeah.
And they have tens of millions of customers. So chasing all these late payers, one, it's a lot of money that's out there. And two, it's inefficient to go after these people. So Credos has a tool for that leverages data and rapid A/B testing with messaging. And it's pretty cool what they do. But it's like, wow, can they do this in other verticals? I get nervous about. So when I'm invested in, obviously I wrote the check and we're moving forward.
Yeah.
So I have enough conviction.
Yeah.
That yes, the product's working for these three big customers, and I'm seeing in their sales pipeline interest in other verticals where people are saying, yes, I have this same problem, and they want it solved as well. So I think it's going to work out.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I'd prefer to see a situation where we have data with lots of different customers, where lots of people are enjoying it and they've been able to demonstrate a repeatable, scalable sales process. But at the seed stage, you typically will have just a handful of customers, and you need to kind of take the leap. Like, can this be repeated or not?
Now,
and we'll see.
Like, I love bringing VCs onto the show that started off as entrepreneurs, early execs at big companies, but they've been in the startup world, and now they've been on the other side of the, of the coin. When it comes to fundraising, what are some of the common mistakes that you see founders making? Like when just a general statement, general question, but what are some of the easy low-hanging fruit things that you're like, man, if they would just get this part right, it would help them so much more along the ways? What are some common mistakes that you see founders make during fundraising process? The
first two sound somewhat contradictory. One is you're always fundraising. So kind of you need to bear that in mind, that you need to have tight messaging about what you're doing with people anytime you're engaged with prospective investors, even when you're not fundraising. You need to have in your mind that you effectively kind of are. Have this story like, here's what I do, this is why it's important, here's where we're at, here's some like nuggets of traction or reasons to be interested. And then just kind of you always lead with that. In those conversations where you're kind of framing for people, like, who are you, what are you doing, and why should I be interested, even if you're not raising. So you're always kind of doing that.
Okay.
And some founders, like, they'll engage with people when they're like, oh, I'm not in fundraising mode, and they just start talking about random stuff, and they're kind of missing an opportunity to frame in the investor's mind, like, this, oh yeah, like, this person's doing something that's really cool. They have some traction. I want to keep in touch with them and stay on. So they're kept warm. So when the founder is actually going to come to market, that person's going to be very receptive to raising. There was a great founder. I'll do a shout out to Nick Halverson at OcuSpace, which is one which is one of my portfolio companies. But he did a great job of this. I tracked him for like 2 years with him. He's kind of letting me know what he was doing, give me little nuggets of success. And we ended up leading a seed round, and they just closed on an A round, $6 million A round at the end of last year. And they're ripping as a business. They're doing awesome. But he did a great job of fundraising when I wasn't really ready to invest. I was like, you guys are too early. But every time he'd reach out, he did a good job of keeping me warm. And then when he was ready, we went for it. And I was very, psyched to move forward with him. So he did a good job of raising when he wasn't really raising. And I think other founders can and should do that. Now, the part that's contradictory is where I see people fail is they're not ready when they are actually fundraising. They kind of half-ass it.
What does that mean to you?
To me, so they'll do like maybe a crappy pitch deck. Or maybe they won't even have a pitch deck. They'll start sending around some emails like, hey, we're going to raise. But they haven't really thought through all of they're not ready to engage with investors in a deep way. So once investors start probing, like, hey, let's check out your financial model. Like, how are you going to spend this $3 million? And they're like, I don't really have a model. We'll get back to you on that. Can I see some customer traction on like what's happening with what you guys have done in the last 12 months? They're like, we don't really have metrics. I'll get you something later. And you kind of lose that momentum. So when you are going to actually formally start fundraising, like have your shit together. You just think in your head or talk to some friendly whether it's VCs or co-investors or angels or just your own team. It's like, if we were going to invest in our business, what would we want to know? And have some information ready. You don't need this massive data room, but have like some of the basics in place where you can start to engage in a diligence process, because this is a momentum play. The fund, like once you are going, it's kind of a momentum process where you can't really drag it out. Because what founders need to remember is that aside from VCs generally having short attention spans, like we're getting hit by people with new ideas multiple times every day. So there's always some new shiny object to potentially chase. So once you are engaged with somebody, you need to like really take advantage of that moment and try to seal the deal as quickly as you can. And if you don't have your shit together, because you're going to start taking meetings and your time's going to get spread out, pitching all the time. But if you blow it on the follow-up, it's all going to be a waste. So, and that's where I see founders mess it up a lot, is they're just not ready for the follow-up. And it just kind of never happens because the VCs end up getting pulled into other opportunities.
Yeah, I wonder if that's where part of what TX was saying of that responsiveness, that like when people are very responsive, it keeps you on that hook. You're like, oh, they're like the ping pong game is still going, and the lack of it is like, oh, I've got all these other people that are gonna, be more attentive, and I gotta keep moving. And so I could totally see how that plays, a role in it. What are your non-negotiables? Meaning like they don't have to be built into the contract. They could just be more personality driven or spiritually driven or whatnot. But like, what are your non-negotiables? It doesn't matter how good the investment is. It's just like, it doesn't sit right with you, if any at all.
Well, for us as a firm, part of our strategy is we're looking for capital efficient businesses generally. So we're not going to go into deals where it's like, we need to raise $200 million for this to be successful. Like if some founders focused on needing to raise a huge sum, we just don't even, like that one's not for us. Like we're going to end up with a tiny little piece of ownership in this company, and we don't want to go down that path. And it's just not a great fit for us. But I think on the personal side, so some of it is, you kind of know it when you see it, but when you're interacting with somebody and they think they've got it figured out and they're kind of combative. So when you're asking questions about their business and they're just really defensive out of the gate about everything, there's probably some real core insecurity there that is just going to be, the business is probably going to be doomed. Like that founder is just not going to get to a successful point if they're very defensive out of the gate about everything that they're doing. And to my prior point about like companies where we've had the best success is when the founder was really open to listening and being, having those strong convictions lightly held, where it's like, all right, hey, I'm willing to be slightly wrong, wrong a bit on this, and I change directions. But if you find a founder that feels like they've got it all figured out, those are the ones where I'm ending the Zoom or the meeting ASAP.
Like, yeah.
And when you see in those questions, you're like, no, I can't even. I don't want to work with this person going forward longer term, because startups are hard. You're going to have lots of hard conversations. No one's got it all figured out. We're operating in this whole realm of uncertainty. If you think you know all the answers, like, you're deluding yourself, and that's going to be a no-no. Yeah.
Now, sometimes, and now I'm sure it's very case by case, but sometimes I imagine that comes because it's like a learned behavior early on. You're like, my older brother always, and so I've got to explain why my thing is right, or like they don't get it or something. And it's almost like eventually becomes this blind spot of theirs because they're so in it. And they almost like can't read the like emotional cues. So, let's like use your own children as a mentoring opportunity here. How would you describe to them, like how do you help someone spot that quality in themselves? Like, you care about it. It's your kid. You want him to understand. And so how can you help someone spot that? And is there anything you think they can do? Or is it like you've just, it's kind of like that's a personality trait that I don't want to work with. But if you were to give advice to someone, or you were to try to help them see that blind spot, anything come to mind of like how you would help them understand why that's an issue and how they can maybe improve upon it?
I don't really know. I mean, I think it's a hard question.
It sure is.
I mean,
yeah.
I think a lot of it's through repetition. So where, for us, we get to, I'm kind of interviewing people all the time, trying to understand their businesses and so forth. So, there's some of that pattern recognition that you get. But I think some of it's, I know it's a cliche, but about trusting your gut, but you just get feelings about people sometimes. And it's like, you just really do have to listen to those. I mean, sometimes I don't do as good of a job as I should do in that regard because I'm so in love with the idea or the product. And you start to overlook things about the founder. And you just got to step back and remember, no, actually the founder is 90% of the answer here, or at least the driver of what's going to be successful. And you can't cut corners around the founder.
Now, switching the conversation over a little more towards the VC route and like more of like strategic, how do you source new opportunities, and have you found any strategies to be most effective? Some people go to events all the time. Some people, work off their alumni network. In your world, in your experience, what's been the best strategy for you? Obviously, you've got this, almost never-ending positive attitude, which makes and attracts people to want to work with you and be with you. But just in general, is there a specific way in which you found to find these amazing startups? There's so many VCs that are like, how the frick do you find these people? And so what's worked best for you, and what advice do you have for others?
This is something I feel like everyone's trying to continuously improve on. So I don't claim to have mastered it. I definitely want to keep getting better. But what's been most effective for me is not being passive about it. So that means, being proactive with conversations and reaching out to people. I mean, I get a lot of my deals from the deals that we actually invest in come from other VCs or from other founders that I've worked with in the past, founders and or board members. But usually I have to ask. Sometimes people will send them over like, hey, I know you guys like these sorts of deals. Maybe this would be interesting to you. So we'll do those. But I get a lot when I actually reach out to someone and I'll say, hey, and sometimes I'll just be a little bit like cheeky about it or whatever, but like, hey, I got $1 million burning a hole in my pocket. Where should I put it? And I'll just send that text out to some people, or to some other VCs. And it's a combo of later stage VCs that, where their minimum check size is $5-10 million or whatever, and whereas I'm looking to do $1 million. So we're not really competing. They may know of a founder, or someone maybe has left one of their existing portfolio companies and has spun something out and is doing something cool. They're like, oh, you should check that. You should go to that person and check them out. Or on the other side, there are quite a few smaller VCs, and we have quite a few here in Southern California, who maybe only have a $5-10 million fund. They're writing $250,000 checks. They can't really lead necessarily a $3 million seed round. So I'll reach out to them and be like, hey guys, like, again, I got $1 million burning a hole in my pocket. Like, what are you looking at? What's interesting? What should I invest into? And things come through that. But if you just kind of sit back and hope that the deals are going to start coming, because even if you have planted the seeds, and even if you are going to the parties, and even if you are doing that, you have to remind people, like try to get top of mind. I know you do all the advertising stuff, but you have to, it is almost like that ad. You need that nudge to get people to be like, oh yeah, actually there's this one thing you might be interested.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we have this thought that's like, oh, everyone must be thinking about me, or like they know I'm the guy that does this. So of course they'll reach out, and you almost like just forget that they have 1,000 things going on, and they just need a little, a little touch. And I also love what you said. It reminds me, like Jesse Itzler, someone that I really look up to, talks about, you have to like create your own luck. And like
100%.
People are like, oh, Jeff got lucky with this company or lucky with that, but they're not like seeing that it was like that message is what created that luck opportunity. And it's really, if you want it, go get it type of a mindset.
Yeah, 100%. So when I was helping run one of our portfolio companies, a company called Mofi, speaking of luck, one of my favorite interview questions, I would just simply ask, are you lucky? And it was really interesting to hear the responses. And we tried to, some of it was a positive attitude element, but we wanted to hire people who thought they were lucky. They might not have truly been lucky.
Yes.
But people who at least believed they were lucky, because they're creating their own luck. Typically, they're proactive. And we were a startup-ish company where we were growing quickly. We needed people who were comfortable with ambiguity. The roles were changing all the time because the company was doubling in size every year. And we needed people who felt like, I'm creating my own luck. I can create opportunities for myself. And I can create this new process in the company that no one's done before because it needs to be done. Or we just needed people who are proactive. But it was interesting. You'd hear great stories, or people who would say like, oh, I've had the worst luck and this and that. Sometimes you could have some recent bad luck, and it's legit bad luck. But hearing how people respond to that bad luck was the follow-up. It's like, well, all right, well, what'd you do about that? Or like, how did you respond? And it was just my favorite interview questions. And honestly, that was a key determinant for us. Yeah. At that time, it was like, all right, should we hire this person or not?
Yeah, my favorite. I haven't done this question in a long time. I might need to bring it back, but. I would sit down with the candidate and I would say to them, you wake up in the morning and you have $0 in your bank account and you go, oh my gosh, I have no money in my bank. How would you make your first $100? And so I had this one young man, freshman at USC, came in for an internship. Yeah. He was dressed in a full suit. I'm like, dude, it's a startup. Like, you don't need a suit here. And we sit down, I'm interviewing him, and I get to that question. And I say, all right, TJ, like, you wake up in the morning and your bank account is empty. All you have is the clothes on your back. How would you make your first $100? And he looks at me and he goes, I have the clothes on my back. And I go, yeah, the clothes on your back, that's it. And he goes, I go right to another job interview. When you think about just like your journey in business and entrepreneurship, in venture capital, mostly venture capital, you've had the chance to work at a bigger later stage VC fund, earlier stage. And I'm just curious, like, when you look back on it all, what were some or a just pivotal moment for you, like a pivotal moment or decision that then like significantly changed the direction or what you wanted to do? I mean, I know you like went to London and like you've had a lot of these big moments, but in VC in particular, was there one kind of fork in the road that like completely just changed the trajectory of like how your, career turned out?
Yeah, good question. I think there's kind of two of them. One was I had started, I was at Saffron Hill Ventures in London where I started, and I moved to a different firm called Berengia where I ended up staying for 11 years. But when I was at Berengia, it was a merger of two, a British company and an American company, small firms. And in that process, the merger was a little bit contentious and messy. And basically a lot of the people in the British office quit. So I was in that London office and it was like me and a couple people left. And they had a portfolio of 30, 40 companies. They had capital that they had to deploy on a certain schedule. And I was like 27 years old and one of the last people standing. And they're like, well, I guess you're now on like these 10 boards and we need to get these deals done and go for it. And I, felt like, oh my God, like I'm not sure I'm ready for this. And it was one of these, I just got an opportunity really that created at that point, but I really leaned into it and embraced it and tried to make the most of it and do the best that I possibly could. But that accelerated my, I was basically doing stuff at an age I probably shouldn't have been doing, but I leaned into it and went for it. And that really set me up to do, I think to have a solid venture career from there. And I think to become a good board member early. So for some VCs, they maybe don't get board opportunities till later in their career, but I was instantly on a bunch in my 20s, and I wasn't awesome at that time. I was getting better. I'm still getting better, I like to think, but that was a huge help where I just was given a lot of responsibility early on that maybe I wasn't probably truly ready for, but there was no one else to do it. And I'm really grateful, for having had that chance at Beringia. That was number one. And then two is also Beringia related. When I left Beringia, I left it to help run my portfolio company, Mophie, which is a consumer electronics company. It was one of my investments. In 2010, I invested into it. It was doing barely anything in revenue. And then in the next 3 years, it went from 0 to 50 million, or nearly zero, but call it a couple million to 50 million in revenue. And the two founders asked me to come on board to help run it at one of the board meetings. And I was a, Beringia board member at that time. And that was a big decision for me where I left the VC side of the table and went to the operator side of the table. And I helped run Mophie then for the next 3 years. We went from 50 to 250 million in revenue. And then we sold it to a public company called Zag. But that was a big decision for me because it took me off the venture path.
Yeah.
So I left the firm, it was a friendly departure, and I still was on the board of a number of the Beringia companies after I left. But it was a hard decision to leave because I loved that team that I was working with at Beringia.
You're still early at that. You're not full, you're not 35, 40, 45. You're like, shit, is this the right decision for me at that point? Wow.
Yeah. So I left. Well, at that point I had turned 40 at that point. So I've been at Beringia for 11 years.
There we go. Yeah. We're back.
So I was at this decision where I'm like, man, I actually have a really great thing going here with Beringia. I love the team. We're doing well as a firm, but I've always wanted to work at a startup. I was kind of an accident. I didn't mean to be a VC as it was. I wanted to be at a startup, and Mophie was crushing it. I liked the founders a lot. It was a super fun company to work with. It was a rocket ship, and it got me back to Southern California, so all those things I wanted to do, but I was leaving a lot on the table. Literally, in leaving Beringia, which is expensive to leave, but it was a different career move, which and I had a great learning experience with Mophie, and we got a good outcome there, and then now I'm back on the VC side of the table, so things worked out for me to get back here. But and I'd like to think I'm a much better investor now for having had those 3 years of that intense grind at Mophie, going from that 50 million to 250 million in revenue. We went from 50 employees to 320, became a global business. That was a ton of work. But I learned so much from it and got most of these white hairs from it. But it was cool.
I'm curious, have you witnessed your in investment strategy evolve over time, or do you find that the steady beat of the drum, the chop wood, carry water mentality has carried you well? And I ask it more from the context of, I feel like ventures changed a lot. Startups have changed a lot. There was COVID came, then there was the post-COVID bit of a recession. Now we're coming back, and just things are moving. There's AI, there's crypto, that things are just speeding up. Have you had to adjust how you strategically invest in companies, whether it's how quickly you invest or how much time you spend on diligence, or just in general, have you found yourself having to evolve, or do you feel proud in the fact that you have really been able to stay true to this is how I do it here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the process is compressed generally in the seed market. It's gotten more competitive. So
because of how many VCs
there's so many more VCs at the seed stage than when I was doing it earlier in my career. We used to be able to take our time. We used to be able to do a ton of diligence, and the companies were typically a little bit further along. Ironically, they, and you had more to look at, I guess, in a lot of ways. But so I do a lot more customer referencing, and now things are going pretty quickly, and you have to. So we end up doing deals a little faster now than we had in years past, and I think that's largely driven by competition. But I also think some of it's compressed too because it's easier. And when I talk about founders having their shit together when they are going to engage in the fundraising process, people can come to the table with it's not there's so much content around about like what should founders do in a fundraising process. So like when people are really ready to engage, like they actually have a lot of the stuff that you want to see, and you can see it really quickly. And that's all been really great. So you can make decisions pretty quickly in terms of getting the data and doing the diligence. And I also think that with sales cycles for companies have been compressed, and the ability to deploy software has shortened, where people can start running sometimes in days or hours utilizing tools. Whereas before, if someone won a customer, it might take like a month for them to get implemented and get going. And you can now look at so many customers and you can see a little bit of the life cycle of a customer almost a little quicker now than you used to in the past, because you can win customers quicker now. So you can see if they're churning, you can see if they're not using the product anymore. Maybe just the one internal champion's using it and then no one else wants to use it. And you're like, okay, maybe this isn't going to go anywhere. They're going to have a hard time upselling in the future because no one else cares about the product. Like you can see some of those things a little earlier now. So how things have changed for us, I think, we're making somewhat faster decisions, which in some respects you might think, well, that's maybe not a good thing. You're rushing to judgment. Mm-hmm. I think we're still checking a lot of the same boxes we've always tried to mentally check around the product and the market opportunity, the competition and the management team, but we're just doing it a little bit more efficiently than we have in the past. And some of it's through the AI tools too. Like market research used to be really a slog, and you can get access to information now in seconds. That and even competitive landscape and some of the stuff you can get insights on pretty early, which is great. And then honestly, just technologies like Zoom just have removed the friction out of like doing meetings with people, whether even if it's customer referencing or whatever, but like that's also compressed things.
I'm curious, do you have any philosophy or perspective post-COVID on in-person versus Zoom? Meaning, let's say you've got two great founders. They both are in a similar market with similar technologies, with similar founding team and structure. And for the most part, they're about as even as they can be in that regard. But one of them flies in from New York to sit down with you in person, and the other one takes it from Chicago in their office or out on Zoom. Is there any weight to you? Have you I'm curious.
Yes.
Not
just because they're making that sacrifice for me, but for me, that biggest indicator is how are they going to win customers in the future? If they have a big customer on the line, are they going to try to win that account from Zoom? Or are they going to get their ass on the plane and go seal the deal? And that to me would be the biggest indicator right there. And honestly, and whether it's TX's, email responsiveness element, like a lot of what I'm looking for when I'm engaging with a founder in that process, it's yes, they're kind of selling me on the company, but so I'm now getting a little bit of a view of what it's like when their customers are being sold to by them. And is that a responsive process? Are they listening to me? Are they, in terms of like hearing the feedback and really understanding where we're at? Is what they're providing well organized and stuff? Is it what I'm asking for? That's kind of part of the process. Like, oh yeah, do we want to move forward with this person? And I had mentioned Nick at OcuSpace. He was incredible at that follow-up. He was so organized. All the stuff was together. He was rapidly responding. It's funny. Like TX is probably onto something. I'm gonna start using that about that email responsiveness.
I'll let him know he's
secret's out, cat's out of the bag. But even for founders, I mean, hey,
they should know
matters.
They should know how important it is. I think some of it is, again, like you're running 100 miles an hour. You've got teammates in your family, and you sometimes lack. There are just blind spots. You can be the most empathetic person and not realize until you hear someone say it, like, oh shit, that's the thing. Oh man, I need to get on that thing, and it's in that's like the one thing that really is in your control. It's you can be on top of that. And that's really I think good to hear you say that, because I think that the younger generation, the young 20-something-year-olds, I think have, with especially COVID being part, it's like they didn't even go to college in class, and so. I think it's important because a lot of the new up and coming businesses, they're run by 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds. And so to hear that, if they're going head to head, that little extra thing, that 1.5 hour flight from LA to SF, or
and it's not just that, like, making the sacrifice of time and showing like, yeah, I'm committed and I want to try to win this. I care about this. The personal relationship is so important. I mean, it's basically like a marriage when you're taking money from a seed investor. I mean, most marriage, I think it's like 50% of the marriages in California don't last more than 5 years. Or even 3 years. I forget what the stat is, but it's something sad. But seed investments, and we're in companies for 7 to 9, sometimes more years. It's longer than most marriages.
Yeah.
And if you're only kind of consummating that relationship over Zoom, I think you're missing something there. Because I think there is something with the face-to-face.
Yeah.
And the personal chemistry and interaction. And I think you just get more reads on the person too. At least from, as the investor, but I think it goes the other way. Like honestly, it's probably more important for the founder to really understand who are they taking money from. In fact, a negative signal for me, you asked about like red flags and like hell no's. I mean, it's for me, it's not a complete like hell no, but if the person that I'm investing in doesn't ask for a reference for me, that's a really bad sign. Like they need to be taking diligence from me. Like they're engaging in a really, partnership with me. They should have a sense of what I'm like to work with.
Yeah.
I mean, I might be friendly on the Zoom and interact nicely on emails and look at a positive attitude, but maybe secretly I'm a jerk.
Yeah.
Like I'm not.
Yeah.
But like, they should ask. So I really want founders to talk to some of the founders. Like, who have you recently invested with? Can I talk to that person? 100%. Like they should be asked, like all founders should ask that of VCs before. I mean, you can do it post term sheet or like when you're in the term sheet phase. It's like, hey, I'd like to get some references. Because honestly, and unfortunately, there are a lot of assholes in our industry. And, for the founders, like if you have a choice, you want to keep assholes out of your life. Of course, it sounds obvious, but like, you really do. Cause it can be a huge source of pain. I mean, for one of my companies, they just raised a Series A, and I'm going to not mention the names of this company, but like part of that A round was to take out an existing investor that was a huge negative force on the company, like and a massive energy drain on the founder. Right. It was terrible. And I'm so happy these guys are gone. But man, it was such a negative. And to make matters worse, he did reference checks and got negative feedback about this VC and still move forward. And they were as advertised. In fact, even worse than advertised. Yeah. And it was terrible. So like he even did the references and he ignored the negative signal, and that was a miss. Yeah. So like founders out there, like due diligence on your investors prior to taking money from them.
Yeah. My dad always says you can't do good business with bad people. And
totally. I love it. That's exactly right. How
do you foresee the future, or how do you foresee like the ongoing evolution of venture capital in regards to AI, in regards to, I remember being like the guy that was like, oh, thank God the creative industry is safe from AI, and then it's like the first thing that comes out is like, oh, copywriter is gone, creative strategist, like no problem, like ChatGPT can do everything. Yeah. And now you're seeing things like, oh, upload models, oh, take the data room and just toss it. It's like there's so much, and you can either be on the side that's like, oh, this is going to kill my job or take things away from me, or use it as the tool. And I'm just curious, like, do you see, I think that's one of the cool parts about you coming from a startup is that you're always like, well, where are we going to be in a year or in 2 years? And you can kind of like see out a little bit. When you like close your eyes and look out into the world of venture, do you see it changing and evolving rapidly? And how do you kind of see your role evolving over time?
Yeah. So I guess there's two things there. And in the venture industry, where it's becoming a very like bifurcated market, where you have these mega funds that they're sucking up 70-80% of all the dollars that go into venture capital are going into these massive funds.
Like the Sequoias or the like
Sequoias, Andreessens, exactly. Excel, some of these like multi-billion-dollar funds, and they can't deploy capital in small checks efficiently. It does not work.
Because it's too much overhead to manage all of the things.
Or and to source the deals. And they would be, if they were writing $1 million, $2 million checks, they'd have to do like 5 deals a day, to deploy the capital over time. It's just, it doesn't work that way. And then managing the portfolio is the part that really doesn't scale. Writing the check is kind of easy, but then tracking it and all this stuff, it becomes a mess, and that part doesn't work. So they're kind of moving upstream and writing the bigger checks, which is good for the growth market. Well, I don't know if it's good for the growth market, but there's plenty of money up there.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the seed market, you're going to have a lot of more firms like us, which I consider ourselves like a boutique venture firm, where we're managing $50, $100 million at a time, where we are writing the $1 million checks. But I think the pool, the number of VCs are going to shrink in the seed space, which is not as good for founders. That I think there are going to be less potential sources of kind of traditional early stage capital, because like a lot of the big guys have gotten too big, or they're just not even really playing in the space. With the caveat that like in the Bay Area, those deals are still getting done,
Mm-hmm,
and people, but they're like, it's a $5 million seed round with like, someone with a PowerPoint, like, hey, here's $5 million. Like, I can't write anything smaller than that, but go for it. Let me know how.
I got a hole burning in my pocket.
Exactly. So like that still happens up here, but like it doesn't happen so much down here in SoCal and a lot of the other markets. So that fragmenting of the market is kind of interesting. It's leaving this big hole in the middle of people that used to play here. So that's tough. Yeah. I think that's going to create a weird dynamic for founders. But then on the company side, you were talking about all these AI tools and how do people avoid the disruption going forward, or how do they benefit from the disruption and benefit from it? I mean, it kind of goes back to my earned insight point and talking about relationships. I mean, relationships really matter. The technology by itself doesn't sell itself. People don't want to use it deeply within their organization without some kind of accountability or interaction with it going forward long term, I think, for most vertical markets. So I think you need someone to sell it. You need someone to do the customer support. There's always going to be some support element. I think there needs to be that product element where you are constantly making the product better. And yes, you can do analytics and see how people are using the product and what features are being used the most. But like, you're going to need someone engaging with that customer. Like, what should we be building next? What's another pain point that you're solving that we haven't addressed yet? Like, there needs to be that relationship element, and that's always going to matter. And it's going to be the big differentiator as these AI tools are pretty commoditized.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. Like, what's really changed for me in the last 20 years is people, and one big difference, you asked about the diligence.
Yeah.
We used to do like source code walkthroughs. We spent a lot of time understanding why the technology is so hard to replicate and build. And we'd ask a lot about patents. Like, what's your IP? I don't ask about IP anymore at all, really.
Because you're almost just assuming that like
it's all commoditized. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone's doing it, and whatever you're doing is going to be ripped off. So like, what other moats can you create that are not about the technology? And it's usually these relationships or strategic partnerships or something else that gives you some edge that's not the tech, because the tech is becoming the commodity now. So like, it's so funny. Crazy. Like, I don't even, I don't look at source code anymore. We don't go through that because it's all going to change, and soon everyone's going to kind of have the same tech platform to work from, or at least things that are similar-ish. Whether you're using Anthropic or if you're on OpenAI or ChatGPT, whatever it might be, like these, they're all kind of the same.
Yeah.
And then they're changing really quickly too. So it's like
the AI maxis are like, no, they are not the same.
Exactly. And look, I appreciate they're not, but like for most applications that are going to be built on top of it, like those differences are pretty nominal.
Yeah.
So the tech matters less and less. But what really differentiates are those relationships, the ability to have the strategic partnerships. I mean, business model used to be a differentiator, but again, that can be more easily replicated when everyone is leveraging the same technology base. So it's like, where do you get a cost advantage? Those are hard now. So it's interesting. But in a world that's become increasingly commoditized, like, it's getting harder to do venture, or it's getting harder to find something that you feel like is truly unique.
Yeah.
Like, I backed a number of deals where it's like, we have these PhDs who are like some of the only handful of people on the planet that know how to do this. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. Now kind of everybody knows how to do it, or it's pretty easy to replicate or
get a boost from the AI.
Exactly. Or to quickly catch up.
I always wonder, like, it's got to be tough for you at some level when you have operational experience, and not just operational, like sold, like been through the thing that everyone you're investing is trying to get to this place, but you're not actually like sitting in the room building the company. And so you only have so much you can do to drive success. How do you define success for yourself? Like what feels like success for you as a VC, and what are you oriented towards?
I mean, at a generic level, at least with my investors, we're trying to triple everybody's money minimally. So that's like we're investing money. I'm trying to generate a return, and I'm trying to generate at least $3. If you give me $1 million, I want to give you back $3, and hopefully a lot more. And some of our prior funds are doing that, which is great. That's like high level. That's my main benchmark. But from like taking it down another level, how do I define success? I mean, for me, it's helping companies live up. It sounds generic, but it's like helping companies live up to their fullest potential, whatever that ends up being. So, when you start on day one, you hope that everyone's potential is being the next Google. But you realize over time, because of competition, because of market dynamics, like things that happen with the management team, whatever, it's not going to be a huge, huge home run. But if you can redefine, you have to constantly redefine success along the way for each company. And in terms of like what's realistic and within timeframes that kind of, hopefully for me, at least align with what we're doing, which is like a 10-year period. So, what is success, a modified success in this 10-year for each one of these companies and for each one of those founders? Some VCs, feel like anything less than a 10 times return cash on cash is a disappointment. But, there are some situations where you can feel like some of the deals I'm most proud of are situations where we, maybe got 3-5 times our money, but like at one point it was going to be zero. And those founders are now worth, tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And like they are now off and doing really great things themselves and kind of paying it forward. And now they're angel investors in new things. And like that feels like a great success. And I take a lot of, pride and joy out of seeing that happen, even though it wasn't one of my best deals.
Jeff, little philosophical, I don't even know what word to use per se, but when you hang the gloves up, when it's all done, no more investing, you're fully retired, you're done. What do you want your legacy to be amongst the founders that you invested in?
So I've always, what I aspire to now is to be the first person that they are calling with good or bad news as it relates to their company. And I want to be that person for them as long as possible and maintaining that relationship over time. And in fact, my wife gets really upset with me generally because most founders, they work their asses off and they're not doing like these, emotional phone calls in the middle of the day. So by the time they're done working, it's by 10 o'clock at night or 11. And then they're texting me like, hey, do you have time to talk? I'm like, okay. And I was like, I thought like... It's going to be about midnight. You're just starting to talk with someone outside, someone right now. And like, but I want to be that person for that founder because that's when they're needed. And for me, like, I would like to, if they will look back, on me as like, Jeff's the person that I always go to, when I needed someone, or the first time we closed that big deal was the first person I let know. Like, that's the relationship that I want as a seed investor, and then to kind of maintain that over time. That's my goal.
Jeff, you're the man. This was such a great episode. I love having you here. Thanks for making the trip down. And thank you again for joining us today on Demo Day. Appreciate you.
It was awesome to be here again, Sean. Thanks so much.
Awesome. And everyone watching from home or listening in, I'm Sean Goldfaden from Coefficient Labs, and this is Demo Day. I'll talk to you soon, guys. See you on the next episode. Peace.